Mayoral Memo with Matthew Dickinson from Dubbo Regional Council.
Dubbo Regional Council is considering to lease or sell its livestock market, which is currently operating at a $1.7 million deficit. We welcome to the program now Mayor of Dubbo, Matthew Dickinson. Good afternoon, Mayor Dickinson.
G'day, Toby. And just to clarify there, Toby, we're considering leasing or selling or continuing to operate it internally. I know many people have focused on the lease or sale options, but we are looking at all three options, which does include continuing to run it ourselves.
Well, that is certainly good to hear, Mayor Dickinson. Can you firstly please explain the current situation with the livestock sale yard, with what they're facing, and why Council has started considering all these three different options?
It's certainly been something that's been bubbling away for some time, Toby. As many people would know, the sale yards were started back in 1950, so they've been there for a long time. And as we progress through those 74 years of running those sale yards, the models have changed, animal welfare has changed, just anti-competition laws have changed. So a lot of statutory changes, legislative changes. As we do with all of our different business units, we make sure we continually review and make sure we're running those in the best possible way. In looking at the sale yards, we determined that maybe there were some issues there that need some tidying up. And in doing that, we said, well, if we're going to tidy those up and just make a few changes, we really should look at all the options. What are all the options available to us as councillors in terms of how those are run? So rather than just fine-tune the edges, we said, let's go out to an EOI process. Let's look at the option of selling, the option of leasing, or continue to review the internal operating model. But the great thing about that is it also gives you an idea of the value of those sale yards. In other words, what would they be worth if we sell them? Well, you don't really know that until you actually go out to some sort of public process to find out what they're actually worth. What are they worth in a lease? How much money should be returned to the community as a result of owning these sale yards? At the moment, they're costing the community to run. How much should we be getting out of them? So it's really about stripping it all down, making sure we understand exactly what our options are, and then making a decision going forward.
Matthew, if Council were to make the decision to go ahead with a sale or a lease, what would unfold in the future?
Well, that's a bit of an unknown. If we did sell or lease the sale yards, it would really be up to the operator there. But let me break down a little bit on those two different scenarios. If we sold it, obviously someone would come along, they would buy those sale yards, and I imagine that they would try and run those sale yards better than Council runs them now. That would mean more customers, making the sale yards better, making them more efficient. And I think of the example of abattoirs, where many abattoirs were owned by councils across the state. And I'm going back around 1958, that process started. And Dubbo Council used to own abattoirs, and sometime during the 80s, mid-80s or so, those abattoirs were closed down. Then we had another little operator come along called Roger Fletcher and started up some abattoirs in Dubbo. And we've now got an abattoirs that employs hundreds more people than Dubbo Council ever employed, exports to 90 countries around the world. I don't think Dubbo Council could ever have developed an abattoirs to be as impressive as Fletcher International Abattoirs. So effectively, if it was bought and run by an external operator, I would imagine that they would try and build it up to be an even better sale yards than they are now. So I don't have a lot of concerns about any loss to the Dubbo community. If they were leased out, it would be a slightly different scenario, and fine-tuning that, Toby, to get to the point where either they were responsible for the maintenance of the yards or we were still responsible for that. That'd be part of the fine-tuning of that contract process. But again, anyone that's leasing that out, I would imagine, would try and build that up to be an impressive sale yards, to increase the throughput, increase the numbers. We would have something in the contract in either way, whether it be a lease or whether it be a sale, where they would have to be maintained as a sale yards for a certain number of years to make sure that we maintain that in our community.
Mayor Dickinson, the potential privatisation of these sale yards, as we've just discussed, have raised many concerns with livestock producers. What kind of feedback have you received from agents or producers on the front line?
Some of the feedback has been a little bit confused, because one of the bits of feedback I've heard from producers, from agents, from people involved in the sale yards is they're great sale yards for the community. They inject over $60 million into the community. And I absolutely agree with that. We're not talking about closing these down though, Toby. So if they were sold or if they were leased or if we continue to run them, then the concern about them losing that money for the community, I don't think is a valid concern, because if I'm a private operator and I buy those sale yards, I'm not going to close them down. I'm not going to spend the tens of millions of dollars that it would cost to buy those sale yards with the purpose in mind of shutting them down. I'm going to try and improve that business and improve the numbers going through, improve the overall operation. So that's one concern that I don't think is necessarily a valid concern. The other concern that I've heard from people is that someone will buy them or lease them and put the prices up so high that it will drive all the producers to other sale yards. And again, I suspect that if I'm going to buy or lease those sale yards as an individual organisation, the last thing I'm going to try and do is drive people away. I'm again going to try and attract people. I'm going to try and attract people from other sale yard operations to use Dubbo, because obviously that's better for me. What they might do with the pricing, that's again up to that individual organisation, how they might do it. But in the overall scheme of things, I've heard more complaints over the years about the standard of our sale yards or about improvements that need to be made, more so than the actual price it costs to sell one particular individual animal.
We'll certainly be following this situation very closely, Mayor Dickinson. Thank you so much for your time on the program this morning, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Great, thanks Toby, good to chat.
Mayor of Dubbo there, Matthew Dickinson, as Dubbo Regional Council is considering the lease or sell of its livestock market, currently operating at a $1.7 million deficit. There's no decision made yet.
Mayoral Memo with Matthew Dickinson from Dubbo Regional Council.